Boiler Room Nation. Introduction. Johnny Delacorte wasn't anyone's first choice for most likely to succeed. At 22 in the early 1990s, he had a handful of community college credits. He'd tried a few different things, a couple of entry-level jobs, some half-hearted attempts at figuring out what he wanted to do. But every option seemed to lead to the same place. Start low, wait your turn, hope it pays off later. He had big dreams, just no idea how he was going to get there. Nothing in his life felt like it was building towards anything that mattered. And if he was being honest, he didn't see himself as the kind of person who won in that system. He wasn't the smartest guy in the room. He wasn't especially polished. He didn't have connections. And the idea that one day he'd be making high six figures, the kind of money he associated with real success, felt distant, almost unrealistic, like something other people figured out, not him. One afternoon, sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, he flipped open the classifieds. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just something different, something that didn't feel like more of the same. That's when he saw it. Stockbroker trainees wanted. No experience necessary. We train you from the ground up. $100,000 first year potential. Top earners significantly more. Aggressive, motivated individuals only. Fast paced environment. Unlimited earning potential. Call today. Ask for Mike. Johnny read it once, then again, then a third time. It didn't look like anything else on the page. Most of the other listings were safe, predictable, written in a way that felt cautious. This wasn't cautious. This was direct. It didn't talk about responsibilities. It didn't talk about benefits. It didn't talk about experience. It talked about money. It talked about speed. It talked about a version of success that didn't require waiting 10 years to get there. He leaned back in his chair. $100,000 in the first year. In 1992, that wasn't just good money. That was life-changing. He wasn't sure he really believed the ad, but it challenged something deep within him. Up to that point, Johnny had quietly accepted a certain idea about himself, that he was capable, but not exceptional, that he'd do okay, but probably never break through in a meaningful way. The real money, the kind that changed how you lived, was reserved for people who had something he didn't: more intelligence, more confidence, more direction. But this ad didn't ask for any of that. No experience necessary. We train you. It suggested something he hadn't seriously considered before, that maybe the difference wasn't who you were, but the opportunity you didn't ignore. He picked up the phone, paused, almost put it back down, and then dialed. The next day. The office wasn't what he expected. No polished reception area, no corporate feel, nothing that signaled prestige. But the moment he walked in, he felt something shift. Energy. Not fake, not forced, real. Phones ringing nonstop, voices cutting through the room with clarity and confidence. People moving with purpose. And underneath it all, momentum. No one looked unsure. That's what stood out. Not one person looked like they were trying to figure things out. They looked like they already had. Johnny hadn't felt that before, not in any job, not in any environment he'd been a part of. And it hit him almost immediately. This wasn't just an office. It was a room full of guys just like him, early 20s, a little rough around the edges, no clear path coming in. You could see it in how they talked, how they carried themselves, how seriously they took what was happening around them. There was an edge to it, but also a kind of shared understanding. They hadn't figured it out before. Now it looked like they did. Not because they were different, but because they were here together in something that felt like momentum, like direction, like they had finally landed in a place where success wasn't abstract anymore. It was happening in real time right in front of them. And if you stayed in a place like this long enough, if you figured out how to operate at that level, you could get seriously rich. A few weeks later, he was sitting at a desk, phone in hand, script in front of him, still unsure, still figuring it out, still very much the same person who had answered that ad. But something had changed, because now he was in a system that didn't care who he had been. It only cared what he produced. And over time, faster than he would have thought possible, that started to matter more than anything else. Within months, Johnny was making more money than he had ever imagined earning at his age. Not eventually, not years down the road, now. And that's the story most people have heard before. Aggressive brokers, cheap stocks, cold calls, pressure, fast money, big lifestyle, and eventually everything falls apart. It's the version tied to firms like Stratton Oakmont and First Jersey Securities, the version that's easy to dismiss, easy to separate from how business works today. But that version skips the part that actually matters. Because Johnny didn't walk in with confidence. He didn't walk in with skill. He didn't walk in believing he was capable of performing at a high level. What he walked into was a system designed to make that happen. A system that was built for people exactly like him, immersed them in an environment that demanded performance, trained them with precision, and reinforced behavior until it became identity. That's why this story still matters. Because the chop shop firms may be gone, but the mechanics are not. They've just evolved. And once you understand how someone like Johnny Delacort goes from uncertain, unproven, and unsure of his own potential to someone capable of producing at a high level, you're no longer just looking at the past. You're looking at a blueprint, one that shows you exactly how performance is built, how belief is created, and how persuasion at its highest levels actually works. That's the story we're going to tell. What Johnny stepped into doesn't look like it exists anymore. There are no crowded rooms filled with shouting brokers, no long rows of phones, no managers pacing behind desks pushing for the next sale. That version feels like something from a different era, or at least that's how it appears. Because if you look a little closer, the structure behind it is still very much alive. It just doesn't announce itself the same way. It doesn't look as obvious. It's quieter, more refined, and in many ways more sophisticated. Today, instead of classified ads, the entry point is social media. Instead of walking into an office, people join programs, communities, or networks. Instead of a loud sales floor, the environment lives inside Slack channels, Zoom calls, and private groups. And instead of brokers, you'll find founders, closers, influencers, and consultants operating in their place. But the underlying mechanics haven't changed. People are still being recruited with the promise of fast income. They're still being placed into environments that expect performance and reward it quickly. They're still being trained, often very effectively, on how to control conversations, project certainty, and move others to act. The tools have changed, the language has evolved, but the system itself is remarkably similar. Which means that this just isn't a story about what happened in the past. It's a way of understanding something that's happening right now in plain sight across industries that most people would never associate with what came before. And once you start to see that clearly, the question shifts. It's no longer about how these firms got away with it. It becomes much more interesting than that. How do they build people who could perform at that level in the first place? That's the story we're going to tell. This is Mark Satterfield. Thanks for listening. Chapter 1 will be available soon.